lesson 208 class. We are going to study section 2 now. We'll be learning various things under this section. Things we are going to be learning in study section 2 are classes and object properties, constructors and destructors, static behaviors, inheritance and composition, polymorphism under this study section 2. Where in this slide for today, we are going to be learning about classes and object properties. Although we have talked about classes and we have talked about objects, we've talked about their properties, but now we are now going to be relating it to Java. Told us earlier on that for this course, the programming language that we are going to make use of is Java. So we are actually learning Java. We are going to be introduced to Java. And now let's move on to objects. I've talked about object before. I remember earlier on in our former class, I told us that object is an entity that encapsulates data, and this describes its current state and methods through which it provides services to the outside world. We talk about for object, we talk about objects having method and having state. And that's why we have an object contains data and method. The data is also talking about the state, or you say the properties. So it has both data and method that manipulates that data. An example is this checking account. A checking account might have a balance. The balance is talking about the state of the account. Then it has an owner. That's an object, so object representing a person. Then now let's go on to class. We've talked about class also earlier on. Told us that class is a blueprint of an object. A class is the blueprint of an object. Told us that class also specifies the characteristics of an entity. It specifies the characteristics of an entity. Don't forget, we talk about objects as an entity. So it's the class that specifies the characteristics of an entity, but it's not an instance of that entity. And that is why we said the objects are instances of a class. So much like a blueprint that specifies the characteristics of a building, like you can have for a building, you can have its height, its width, its length. So the same thing, it's class. The same thing goes with class. Class is a blueprint. That's why we say class is a blueprint of an object. So looking at what this expression, this statement here, like a blueprint that specifies the characteristics of a building, meaning that the building is the object, and the class we are talking about is the height, the width, the length. And that's why we say is the characteristics of an entity. So the characteristics of that building is the height, width, length, which are the class. So classes are to objects as blueprints are to ours. We also say the unit of programming is the class from which objects are created. Then we have what we call object instantiation. What does that mean? Object instantiation is creating an object of a class. Is what we call object instantiation. Many objects can be instantiated from a class, just like many houses can be built from a blueprint. When you have a blueprint of a house, you can use that blueprint to build so many houses. So the same way, many objects can be instantiated from a class. We'll still go in depth into this as we move on. Then now let's go to what are the characteristics of a class. What are the characteristics of a class? By now we now know what a class is. So what are the characteristics of a class? Classes contain methods. These methods are behaviors. So classes contain methods which implement operations and field, and also implement the attributes. In a class, we have methods. which would implement the operations and fields. As we move on in the examples, you get to see this. Methods of a class help in manipulating the fields of that class. The method of a class will help in manipulating the fields of that class. When we say field, it's also data. Told us this when we started. When we talk about field, it also means the data. So the method of a class would help in manipulating the field of that class. That's what the method will do. Then it will also provide services to the clients. Clients of a class are other classes that use that class. The clients of a class are other classes that use that class. We've talked about subclass, base class, superclass in our former study section 1. In the study section 1, we've talked about this. So the clients of the class we are talking about are other classes that use the class. So the method would also help to provide services to the clients of the class. Then also, when class relates with each other, we call that relationship association. When the class relates with each other, we call it association. Like you can have a class, you can have the patient class, a nurse class, and a doctor class. All these relate with each other, and that relationship is what we call association. This is very important in programming. Why is this important? It's important because a large project can be broken down into smaller classes. When you have a large program, it can be broken down into smaller classes, and they still make use of some things in the main class, in the base class. Then now let's go to one of the characteristics of class. A class allows software reusability. We have talked about this also. We've talked about reusability as one of the advantages of object-oriented programming. Don't forget that Java is an object-oriented programming, and we've talked about reusability. So classes allow software reusability. When we say software reusability, it's when you are able to use the class all over again. You can use it more than once. So that's what we mean by software reusability. Groups of software can be packed and be reused. That's talking about reusability. Then what are the advantages of this software reusability? This software reusability makes programmers build more dependable and efficient systems. Why do we say it makes programmers build efficient and dependable systems? It allows this because all the classes that are being reused would have gone through several testing, it should have gone through debugging, it should have gone through performance tuning. So building it now makes the programmers to build more dependable and efficient systems, because the classes that are being reused now have gone through extensive testing. It has gone through program debug, it has gone through program performance tuning, it has gone through debugging. So it will now make the programmers build more dependable and efficient systems. So this is one of the advantages of reusability. The second advantage is that it saves programmer time and effort that would have been used to build a particular class all over again every time they need such a class. So it saves programmers the time and effort in rebuilding a class that is being needed all over again. Now let's go to predefined classes and user-defined classes. Predefined classes and user-defined classes. Now we're going to talk about predefined classes first. Related classes are grouped into packages, and in Java call this Java Application Programming Interface. When you have related classes grouped into packages, they are collectively referred to as Java Application Programming Interface, API. Then the predefined classes. When we say predefined classes are the building blocks for constructing new classes. They are the building blocks that you use in constructing new classes. We're still going to be talking about constructor in the next class. So predefined classes are the building blocks for constructing new classes. The programmers often use this import declaration to identify the predefined classes in Java. The declaration that the import declaration that programmers often use import declaration to identify predefined classes in Java. And this is the syntax for the import statements. The syntax for import statements is import package name dot class one name depending on the class. You can have class 2 depending on the number of classes. So the syntax for import statements is import package name dot class name. But because it consumes a lot of time, we now use the syntax now used for all is import package name dot star. When you see star, it means all. That means this is going to be used for importing all the class packages. That's the syntax for importing all the class packages. Import package name dot star. That's the syntax for importing all the class packages. Then we have the user-defined classes. User-defined classes. User-defined classes. We can also call these user-defined classes programmer-defined class. So what do we mean? Classes newly created by programmer to assist in achieving a desired task. User-defined classes are classes that are newly defined by a programmer to assist in achieving a desired task. It's different from the predefined classes that has been defined before, and we have to import it using that syntax I gave us in the last slide. So, but for user-defined classes, they are classes that are newly defined by a programmer to assist in achieving a class. And the class keyword introduces a user-defined class declaration in Java. You use the keyword class. Don't forget that keywords are reserved words. I know we have learned about this in our first semester class where we talk about different keywords that we have in different languages. So for Java, class is a keyword. So the class keyword introduces a user-defined class declaration in Java. So when you see class starting a declaration, you should know that that is a keyword class. And after the keyword class, it's followed by the class name. And that's why we have for the syntax for declaring a class. The syntax for declaring a class is what we have on the slide. We have public class name. Public is the modifier. It's talking about the modifier. We have talked about the different modifiers that we have in our study section 1. We talk about the public, the private, the protect. So for declaring a class, the syntax is public, you have class, then followed by a class name. It's followed by a class name. When you see a class name in Java, that class name is a valid identifier that can contain different things. You can have characters, you can have letters, you can have different characters which consists of digits, it can be underscore, it can be dollar, but it must not begin with a digit or contain space. It mustn't begin with a digit or contain space. So for a class name, which is a valid identifier in Java, it consists of a series of characters like letter, digits, underscore, dollar sign. Then the only constraint is that it does not begin with a digit or contain space. So that is the syntax for declaring a class. When you want to declare a class, you start with public, you have the keyword class, then you have the class name, the name that you are giving to that class. Then the class body also contains the method. That class body that we are seeing in the syntax, it contains the method that specifies the action, method that contains the action that the object of the class can exhibit. It is that method that specifies, tells us the action that the object of that class can exhibit. Understand this better as we move on. Now, we are going to an example, creating a simple class. We want to create a simple class, and what the class will do is to display, what the program will do is to display I love Java programming. Now we are going to be creating a class for this. This is an example. We have the public class first program, public static void main string args. Then we have the args means arguments. Then we have system.out.println I love Java programming. Then don't forget that when you see double slash starting, you take note that that is a comment. That is a comment, a program to display a line of text. Now, let's now take the program line by line. Let me explain. Don't forget, I told us that the syntax for declaring a class is public class, then the class name. So meaning that for this, creating this simple class, we have public, the class, which is the served word, or we say keyword in Java. Then we have the class name. The class name here is the first program. First program is the class name here. Then the class is an executable class. It's an executable class because it has a main method. It has a main method. That's the line 2. It has a main method. That main method you are seeing there makes it an executable class. It's an executable class. Then the system.out means standard output objects. That is what is going to bring out that text that we want you to display. System.out.println. System is the standard output objects. Then take note, the message in the parentheses, the I love Java programming that is in parentheses, it must be in double quotes because it is a string literal. It is a string literal. When we're doing Perl first semester, we talked about this under data type. This is a string literal. So because it's a string, it must be enclosed with double quotes. It must be enclosed with double quotes. So when you run the program, the output that will be displayed is I love Java programming. So this is just an example of how a simple class is being created. That's how a simple class is being created. So now let's go on to object instantiation. Creating an object of a class. When we say object instantiation, is the act of creating an object of a class. The act of creating an object of a class is what we know as object instantiation. Just like room in the blueprints of a house will be useless if a house is not built from the blueprints. The room in the blueprints of the house will be useless if that house is not built from the blueprints. So also the method of a non-executable class will be useless if specific instances of such class are not created. If you don't have specific instances of that class, the method in that class will be useless. So let's move on. Objects are instances of a class that make actions defined in the class to be carried out. We talk about objects and classes. So now this is now telling us about object instantiation, which is the act of creating an object of a class. So that's why we say objects are instances of a class that makes actions that are defined in that class to be carried out. The actions, the method. Don't forget that actions defined in that class are talking about the method. And that's why we say the method of a class will be useless if specific instances of such class are not created. Now, the syntax, what's the syntax for creating objects of a class? If you want to create objects of a particular class, we have the syntax here. The syntax is the class name, the object name equals new class name. Then you have the closing two brackets that are being enclosed, which means where parameters will be passed. So this is the syntax. We have the class name, syntax for creating objects of a class. We have the class name, we have the object name equals new class name. The class name is the name of the class whose object is to be created. The class name that we are seeing, that class name that is missing, is the class name of that class that you want its object to be created. That is the class name. Then the object name is the name of the objects. Name of the objects. Then the new there represents a call to initialize the objects. Is a call to initialize the objects. So this is the syntax for creating objects of the class. And all these are being done by constructor, the constructor, which we'll still talk about as we move on. Then now let's go to local variables and instance variables. We have what we call local variables and instance variables. What do we mean by local variable? What do we mean by instance variables? Local variables are variables that are declared in the body of a particular method. Local variables are the variables that are being declared in the body of a particular method. These variables can be used only in that method. This local variable that we are talking about, it can be used alone. It can be used only in that method. So that's why we say they are variables declared in the body of a particular method, and they can only be used in that method. Then we have instance variables. Instance variables are the attributes of the class. They are the attributes of the class. And these instance variables must be declared, must be initialized rather. They must be initialized to their default value before they are being used. You must initialize it to their default value before you can use them. Instance variables are declared inside the body of a class. They are declared inside the body of a class, but they are declared outside the bodies of class method declaration rules. Understand this better by the time we look at an example. So instance variables are declared inside the body of a class, but they are declared outside the body of class method declaration. What's the syntax for declaring instance variable? The syntax for declaring instance variable is data type, then you have the variable name. Data type, then you have the variable name. We've talked about data type, the 100 level, we know we have different data types. You can have int, you can have char, you can have float, you have various data types. You can have string. So the syntax for declaring instance variable is data type variable name. You have the data type, then you have the valid variable name. It must be a valid data type, then a valid variable name. Like when you have, if it's integer, that shows that it will be digits. So let's move on. Then now, what is the syntax for declaring instance variable within a class? The syntax for declaring instance variable within a class. Don't forget we said instance variable are the attributes of the class. Now, what is the syntax for declaring instance variable within a class? This is the syntax for declaring instance variable within a class. We have the access modifier, the data type, the variable name. We are including the access modifier now because we are declaring it within a class. Within a class. Then the access modifier, we've talked about this also in study section 1. This access modifier can be public, it can be private. Don't forget, it can be public, it can be private, it can be protected. So we have different access modifier. And what is the function of the access modifier? Access modifier will tell how other methods in the class will access a particular method. That is what access modifier will do. So, and remember I said we can have private, we can have public. So now, the syntax is access modifier, data type, then the variable name. So the only difference in the syntax for declaring instance variable within a class and that of just declaring it's the access modifier. If you are declaring it within a class, you must take the access modifier there. Then now we have what we call set and get methods. We have the set, we have the get. We've also talked about this in study section 1. So the sets are mutators. Sets, they are mutators. And what are they used for? Sets are used to manipulate the instance variable of a class to assign values to them. We use sets. It's a reserved, is a keyword in Java. So there is a method. So sets are used to manipulate the instance variable of a class to assign value to them. And we call the set mutators. Then we also have gets. Gets are called accessor. They are called accessor. We have also talked about this in study section 1. Gets are used to manipulate the instance variables of a class to obtain values from them. They are used to manipulate the instance variables of the class to be able to retrieve or we say obtain values from them. Now let's look at an example where we'll understand how set and get method operates. Example of set and get. We have this program public class, set get class, private string first name, public void set first name equals name. Now let me go to explaining what this program is about. It's a program that has a private instance variable. Private instance variable and method to manipulate the instance variable. The instance variable first name. The instance variable here is the first name. Don't forget in the slide preceding this, we talk about the syntax for declaring a instance variable within a class. And we said the syntax is access modifier, the data type, then the variable name. And that's why we have private string first name. So the first name there is the instance variable. That's the instance variable. Instance variable. The private is the access modifier. We are declaring this with private. And the data type there is string data type. We are using string data type because it will accept first name of students. And you know, for name is a string, it's not numbers rather. So since it's letters, it's going to be the data type to be used will be string. And that's why we have private string first name. The first name there is instance variable, which is a string data type, because it will accept first name of students. And why is it declared as private? It's declared as private because it will not be used outside the class. Don't forget, when we talk about access modifier, as explained to us, the private, the public. When a class is being defined, when you use access modifier private, that means it will not be used outside that class. But when you define public, that means it will be used outside the class. But now, for this instance variable, we are using access modifier private because it will not be used rather outside that class. It's not going to be used outside that class. Then we have, going to the next line now, we have public void set first name string name. That is talking about the method. This is talking about the method. And the access modifier used here is public. Then we have the return type void, which we have talked about also, void. Then the set first name. The set first name is the method. That's the method. That's talking about the method. Set first name. That's talking about the action that will take place. What do you want? What do you want that instance variable to do? It will set first name. And don't forget that we said sets are used to manipulate instance variable of a class to assign value to them. So that means you are assigning value to the first name, to that first name. So the method here sets first name. Then we have parameter. That's why we have arguments. These string names are parameters that you are going to pass a value to that first name. And you have string name. So the method set first name stores a student. It will store a student first name. Are you getting me? It will store a student first name. Then why do we make use of void? Void name is assigned to the instance. Is used because it does not return any data. It does not return any data. You are passing data into it now. It prompts first name. What's the first name? You now give the first name. That's what the program will do. So yeah, it is not returning any data at that point. So, and that is why we are making use of void return type void. Then now let's go to the get. Public string, the access modifier used there is public string get first name. Get first name. Don't forget that the get method is to manipulate the instance variable. The instance variable here is the first name. So it is to manipulate the instance variable of that class to retrieve value. So get first name. It will prompt get first name. Then it will return first name. This is returning a value. And that's why we have return first name. It will return a value. So what the program will do is the comment section now where you have the slash, a program that has a private instance variable and method to manipulate the instance variable. So we'll be able to talk about the set and get method, the local variable, and instance variables. Then we've also talked about the object instantiation. We've talked about the predefined class. We've talked about the user-defined class. We've talked about the classes, objects, and the characteristics of the class. So we are going to stop here for today. Then in the next class, we'll move on to constructor. Have a wonderful day.